Hi, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about a state of consciousness, in fact, a state of unconsciousness, namely sleep. So we'll talk about sleep and different stages of sleep. So let's get started. So we spend almost 1/3 of our lives sleeping. It's a state of unconsciousness, as opposed to a state of consciousness or different states of consciousness that we earlier looked at. Here we are unaware, for the most part, of our surroundings. So when you're in sleep, you are unaware of your surroundings. So you're unconscious of your surroundings, but it doesn't mean that that you're completely unaware. Research suggests that you are aware of at least things that are more important to you. For instance, imagine a parent, especially with a newborn, sleeping in a different room, for instance, and the moment they hear the sound of the baby, especially crying, then they just wake up. So sleep is a state of unconsciousness, but there are some exceptions to whether or not we are aware of our surroundings. Well, if the surrounding, for example, you're sleeping, you can be still woken up, right? So you can be still made aware of things by waking you up, but mostly we are unconscious when we are in sleep of the surroundings. Now, our sleep is a cyclical process. There are different, we sleep in cycles, right? We sleep at night, we wake up in the morning, again work all day, then we sleep again at night, as if there is a clock in our brain or mind, and it's kind of regulating this rhythm. And this, we often refer to this cycle or rhythm as circadian rhythm. Now, circadian rhythm is not only specific to the sleep, but it is specific to several rhythmic processes that happen in our body. For example, there are many bodily activities. For instance, the amount of hormones in our body, they fluctuate throughout the day in a cyclical fashion. Our body temperature, it changes in a rhythmic fashion throughout the day. Or the amount of hormones released also change throughout the day. So there is some rhythm or pattern to different bodily processes, including sleep, and we call this circadian rhythm. So just to show you, our alertness also changes throughout day, our body temperature changes throughout day, including our sleep, which also changes in a cyclical fashion, and then it repeats every 24 hours. Now, this brings to the circadian rhythm of sleep. Like, how is it regulated? What is the biological basis of sleep? Now, if you look at this picture, you see that, let me zoom in so you can see clearly here. Okay. Now, if you remember the hypothalamus, which is a part of your subcortical structure, right? Now, there is a small portion of this hypothalamus, which is called SCN, which is a suprachiasmatic nucleus. Now, this is a particular structure that is sensitive to light. So when you open your eyes, and if there is light, like for example daylight, the information goes to the retina, and from there the information goes eventually to your cortex, but before that it goes to thalamus and hypothalamus. Now here, this structure called suprachiasmatic nucleus, it is sensitive to light, and it controls the activity of another structure called the pineal gland, which is a part of the endocrine system, which is responsible for releasing this hormone called melatonin. And this melatonin hormone, it regulates our sleep in a way that if there is melatonin in our system, you feel drowsy, you're in sleep. And if you remember, or if you if you are aware of it, people sometimes are prescribed to take melatonin over-the-counter medication, which is basically a form of hormone to induce sleep because melatonin gives a drowsy feeling. Okay, let's come back to SCN. So when there is daylight and then this suprachiasmatic nucleus senses light, then it what do you say, suppresses pineal gland, so it doesn't release melatonin, so you're not drowsy, so you're active. But during night or during when there is darkness, this will lead to this will make suprachiasmatic nucleus stimulate the pineal gland or activate it to release the melatonin, which leads to a feeling of drowsiness, and hence we feel sleepy. So this is like a process. It depends on the time of the day. It depends on the availability of light. So that's why sometimes when it's too cloudy, you feel sleepy because and you can attribute that to the sensitivity of the SCN to light. Now, if this rhythm of sleep cycle, if it changes or if it disrupted, we call that jet lag. So jet lag usually happens when you go from one time zone to a different time zone. For instance, the time zone in India and the time zone here is different. For instance, if it is night here, it is day in India. So if I were to travel to India, then I'll have a different cycle, and then my body will have some resistance in terms of or take some time to set to this new day and night cycles, and we call that jet lag. Now, typically, people feel more drowsy, sleepy during day, and more awake at night, depending on how much of a difference there is in the time zone from where you are and where you went to. But it is not just a disruption in sleep cycle. People with jet lag usually report being, having difficulty in concentrating. They're more irritable, and things like those. Then there are some ways to actually get over jet lag. And I'm going to post this video so you can see what those measures are. So we'll skip this video to save time, but again, I'll make this available so you can actually watch that video to learn more about jet lag. Now, jet lag also influences your performance. Now, in research, it was found that a team going to the east, a visiting team to the east is found to win 37% of time, whereas if a visiting team is going to the west, it wins 44% of the time, suggesting that there is some difference in their performance depending on where your jet lag is towards east or west. Now, this brings us to the stages of sleep. Now, okay, now we're talking about sleep, and before we move on to talk about stages of sleep, I would like to give some background information about how researchers typically measure the brain activity, especially in sleep research. Now, one of the things that you already know is the electroencephalogram. Electroencephalogram is a method of measuring the electrical activity of the brain. It's a gross electrical activity of the brain. So we have electrodes put everywhere on the scalp, especially some specific parts of the body, the brain, and you measure the electrical activity of your brain, of the brain. Now, Now, with specific to this EEG, there are different patterns of electrical activity represented as brain waves, and we'll talk about that in a second. But before that, I would like to give you information about two more ways that researchers study processes related to brain. For instance, um, we have EMG, called electromyogram, that actually measures the tone and activity of the muscles of body in general. Now, this is important, especially when you talk about REM sleep. But for now, just keep in mind this another measure called EMG. Then we have a third measure called electrooculogram, and this measures the eye movements, the movements of the eye. So you have EEG for the brain activity and EMG for the muscular activity of the activity of muscles, the tone of the muscles in general, and electrooculogram for the movement of the eyeball or the eyes. Now these last two, the EMG and EOG, are particularly important to confirm or determine these the last stage of sleep, called the REM sleep, or the REM stage of sleep. Now, the REM here stands for rapid eye movement. So you can guess which of these measures is more appropriate to measure the eye movements, and that would be EOG. Now, another characteristic of REM sleep is that our body gets into a stage where it feels like it's paralyzed. So our movements of our muscles is toned down. So we're not allowed, or we won't move our body as much. And again, which measure do you think would be more applicable to measure or capture this aspect of the changes in the body? And that would be electromyogram. So that is some information. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is specific to EEG and the different kinds of waves there are specific to how brains function, which is measured through electrical activity captured by EEG. Now, when you have a brain wave specifically, there are two characteristics that are important to understand how how the brain activity changes during different stages of sleep. The first one is the frequency of the wave. Frequency here refers to the speed, the number of waves, like this and this will make one wave. The question is, how many waves do you have in a second or a fraction of a second? That gives information about the speed of that wave. Now, if you are thinking a lot or thinking about various things, then your thought process is speed, right? It's active, and in that cases, you usually see speed, high frequency waves. For instance, this is a high frequency wave. This is a higher frequency than others, but not so high as this one. So as you can see, all these waves are listed here in the decreasing order of their frequencies. The highest frequency, a lower frequency, and this is the lowest frequency. Another aspect of characteristic of brain waves is the intensity or the amplitude. Amplitude here refers to the vertical length of the wave. So as you can see, it is shorter, right? Here is a little longer, it is even more longer, it is even longer, and usually longer waves or waves with longer amplitude suggest more intense way of the brain activity. So now here there are especially 4 waves that we need to talk about. They include the beta waves, alpha waves, theta waves, and delta waves. And all these differ in, as you can see, in frequency and amplitude. because these are the two characteristics that will help us understand the brain activity. And for you to remember, I usually use this acronym BATED, B-A-T-E-D, and these waves are ordered or listed in the order of their decreasing frequency, as you can see, and increasing amplitude. So these waves are faster waves, shorter amplitude. These are slower when compared to beta waves, and they have higher amplitude. Here, further slow, but again, increased amplitude. And here, the least slow waves, slowest waves in this list with the highest amplitude. Okay, why is it important? Well, different stages of our sleep are associated with these different kinds of waves. That's why it is important that you understand what these different waves are and what their characteristics are. For instance, when you're awake, there are lots of beta waves, right? Beta waves. These beta waves are high frequency, they're asynchronous, and low amplitude, right? So when you're awake, there's a lot of speed thinking going on. Now, once you close your eyes and relax, we call that relaxed wakefulness. You're not sleeping yet, but you're trying to, or you're just relaxing. At that stage, it is characterized by alpha waves, which are slower waves when compared to beta waves, and with a higher amplitude than beta waves. Now, that brings us to the next stage. Usually, if I'm not wrong, it takes like 10 to 15 minutes for you to go from awake to the next stage, called the stage 1. Now, stage 1 and stage 2 are associated with these specific waves called theta waves. Now, theta waves, as you can see, slower waves when compared to alpha waves, and have longer amplitudes when compared to the alpha waves. Now, one difference between stage 1 and stage 2 is that stage 2 is characterized by, and we're going to talk about that in a second, a special bursts of electrical activities in the brain, and we call those spindle, sleep spindles, and we'll come back to that in a second later. But I just wanted to give you these 4 waves and what they are related to. So beta waves associated with awakeness, and alpha waves with relaxed wakefulness, theta waves with stage 1 and 2, and stage 3 and 4 are associated with delta waves. So stage 1 is the lightest stage of sleep. So if you wake somebody up in stage 1 or stage 2, they say that they weren't sleeping. Stage 3 and 4 are the deepest stages of sleep, and it's also called deep sleep. And when it's difficult to wake somebody up in the in this delta sleep or the deep sleep. Now, when you wake somebody when they are in stage 3 and 4, they feel they're disoriented, and they also usually things like sleepwalking, sleep talking are usually associated with this delta stage. Then there is another stage which is the REM stage, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But I just want to give you some basic information about different kinds of waves when related to the different stages of sleep. Again, it's batted, beta when you're awake, alpha, relaxed, theta, stages 1 and 2, and delta, stages 3 and 4. Now, we'll talk more about these different stages of sleep by going back to the original Prezi presentation. Okay, so we were talking about different kinds of waves. We talked about batted, the beta, alpha, theta, and delta waves. Now, Excuse me. Okay, so we also look at EEG and other ways of measuring processes related to different stages of um, brain activity. And we particularly said that EEG is important to capture the electrical activities measured in the form of waves. Um, and um, and let's look at that one more time. So when you're awake, you have lots of beta waves, as you can see. Beta waves are high frequency, low amplitude waves. We're trying to relax. These waves become more rhythmic, and these are called alpha waves because these are slower, and you can see the amplitude is increasing. And once you get to stage one, it usually takes 10 to 15 minutes. This is characterized by theta waves. Number B, A, T. Theta waves. Theta waves are slower waves with longer amplitude when compared to beta or alpha waves. You can see they're slower, so frequency is reduced here. There are more waves, there are fewer waves per a given fraction of time, and the amplitude is bigger here when compared to alpha waves. Now, even stage two is similar to stage one in terms of the waves. In fact, you'll see the pattern is pretty much same. In other words, there are theta waves in stage one, two also. So stage one and stage two characterized by theta waves. But one difference is that stage two has a special bursts of activities of increased frequency. A burst, like it repeats every 60 seconds or so every minute. Um, a wave pattern like sleep one will have this bursts of high frequency waves. And these are called sleep spindles. And sleep spindles are characteristic of stage two sleep. Again, otherwise it's basically theta wave. Then slowly from stage two, the next two stages are stages 3 and 4. As you can see, these two stages are characterized by these longer and slower waves, waves with longer amplitudes and low frequency waves. These are called delta waves. Now, delta waves is when uh, uh, delta waves is in stage 3 and 4, but stage 3 has fewer delta waves, like less than 50%, but stage 4 has more delta waves, more than 50%. So as you can imagine, or as you can see, the brain activity is slowing down. And from 3 to 4, it even slows down further. Now in the REM stage, it's exactly opposite here. It is REM sleep is called the rapid eye movement stage, where the brain activity in this stage is same as when you're awake. You can see that slightly different, but it's pretty much same. It has lots of beta or other quick, short waveforms. Now, um, Now, when you talk about how we proceed from one stage to another, now we can look at this one. So when you're awake and relaxed state, you go from there to stage one. And it usually takes a person to go from stage one to stage two to stage three to stage four. It takes an hour almost to reach your stage four, end of stage four, during the first sleep cycle in one night. Then within half hour, you go back and finish the REM stage. But for that, you can directly go to REM stage. Your brain goes through stage 4 to stage 3 to stage 2 to, instead of going to stage 1, it goes to REM. So stage 1 is skipped here. Now, what happens eventually is this is first cycle, right? And one cycle consisting of stage 1, 2, 3, 4, And going back to this, including REM, starting from here till here, this length is usually typically 90 minutes, hour and a half. It takes hour and a half to complete one sleep cycle. Now it will take another hour and a half to start from the end of the REM to get and complete another REM by going through other processing between another hour and a half. The only difference is that the subsequent cycles will have more of REM and less of other stages like stage 4 or stage 3. So as you can see, the next cycle, you are basically seeing it goes from REM to stage 2, to stage 3, to stage 4, then back to 3, 2, and REM. And eventually what happens is there won't be stage 3, 4 at all. So eventually the upcoming cycles will have just step 2 and REM and step 2 and REM and step 2 and REM and step 2 and REM. The point is your REM, your additional sleep cycles after the first one will have more and more of REM. That's why if you take nap, that's not much helpful, especially during night. It's always helpful to take a longer sleep and longer sleep times, because then what happens is you will have more of REM. Now, the REM sleep also changes across lifespan. If you look at babies, they actually sleep a lot more for a long period of time, leading to having longer, more REM sleep. But as we age, we have less and less of REM sleep. But even when you just look at these proportional difference, there's always non-REM sleep more than REM sleep. Why? Well, for you to go to REM, at least you need to go to stage 2 before you can get to REM. So at least you have one stage 2 or more than that before you can go to REM. So there's always non-REM in addition to REM for any given cycle. So if you're sleeping for like 7 hours, then you probably have like 3 to 4 cycles of sleep. That's why a good thing to do is use an app like Sleep Cycle app that I use. It actually measures your body movements. You know, the cell phones these days, like iPhone, these cell phones have, they can track your movement, right? So if you're sleeping and then the phone is next to you, then your body movements, based on that, it will determine what stage you are, and it will wake you up when you finish the cycle, as opposed to waking you up in the middle, which usually happens when you use an alarm as opposed to using a sleep cycle alarm. So that's about the stages of sleep. Then there is this video on sleep cycles, and I'm going to post this on Blackboard so we can go over that. Now we'll move on to the next topic, the dreams.